When you're printing, have you ever had a problem with the colors in your image being out of registration? When you pull your squeegee, you're dragging the mesh, and that mesh is causing the image to be out of registration. Now, if that screen was very tight, the mesh wouldn't shift, and you wouldn't have the color registration problems. Have you ever had a problem of ink building up underneath the screen? Where does that come from? And the answer is the same. Low tension. When you have low tension screens, the mesh is dragging across the image and the ink is accumulating. So if you have high tension in your screens, you will not get the ink buildup. You won't be wiping and cleaning the bottom of screens. When your screens are soft and you pull the squeegee, the mesh forms a wave in front of the squeegee. So you're pushing against the tension of the mesh, and that's slowing you down. And if you do enough of it, you get carpal tunnel syndrome in your wrists and your elbows. So if you want to speed up your printing, use tight screens. A lot of people, when they print, they flash cure between colors. Flash curing is because they've driven the ink, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, they've driven the ink into the fabric. So the color of the fabric is coming up through the ink film. If you use tight screens, you'll be able to shear the ink, lay the ink on the surface, rather than drive the ink into the garment, and you'll have a bright image and eliminate the labor of flash curing. So those are 4 significant problems that our customers have due to low tension. So we put them on retentionable screens. With a retentionable screen, when you tighten the mesh, any mesh count, and do nothing but walk away, in 2 hours, if you came back and measured that tension with a meter, you would find you have lost 25% of the tension. So we have our customers rotate these rollers to take the slack out of the mesh, to recover the lost tension and raise the tension a little bit more. Now, 4 hours later, we check the tension again, and we've lost another 15%. It's like a tire losing air. You're just continually losing the air. Eventually, that tire is going to go flat. And that's what's happened to screens that you cannot retighten. So after we've retensioned and recovered the lost 15%, we wait overnight, and the next day we've only lost 5%. So we're retension once again. At that point, we would coat the screen, run it on a job. When the job is over, we scrape the ink out, we take out the stencil, but we do not take out the mesh. Now, when we've been printing off contact. That means with the mesh not touching the garment. So we've been pushing that mesh down, deflecting it constantly with every stroke. That causes the tension to decline. So the tension at the end of the job will not be the same as it was at the beginning. So at the end of the job, we get our wrench out again. It just takes a couple of seconds. We rotate the roller. We recover the lost tension and raise the tension yet again. If we do that a number of times, so we've accumulated 500 prints on this mesh, the tension at the end of the job will be the same as it was at the beginning. We call that mesh work hardened. So print 300 will look like print number 1. And if we don't get to work hardened status, print 300 will not look like print number 1. Every successful printer I've ever known tells me that tight screens work better than soft screens. And now we know why. So the next thing is, how do we get these screens to be tight? I'm going to go through the 3-step process of inserting and tensioning the mesh. To solve all those problems we talked about, we need a retentionable frame. The best retentionable frame available is called a Newman frame, named after the inventor Don Newman and sold by the Stretch Devices Company. This is a Newman frame. The sides are tubes that rotate, corners are castings. Why is the Newman frame better than other retentionable frames that are on the market? Here's why. One thing is the diameter is a little bit larger, so the frame is stiffer. It'll hold tension better. Secondly, the castings are made out of quality aluminum, not recycled aluminum, so they don't crack like it will with other brands. These tubes are sealed, so you don't get water in the Newman frame. Some of the other brands, when you handle the frame, you'll hear the water sloshing around. With other brands, you'll get ink and emulsion on the threads of the bolts. Then the threads get corroded, and your frame is not going to be able to service you well. The Newman frame is just a better quality frame. And even if I had to pay $10 more for Newman than another brand over the thousands of shirts that I'll print, the cost per shirt in my frame is in the 4th decimal point. It's so small, I don't care. This is the frame I want, it's the one I can do the best quality work with and work the fastest with. So that's the Newman frame. So what tools do I need in order to insert the mesh and stretch it? Well, the first thing I want to do, I want to check the table to make sure the table is absolutely flat. So put a straight edge on there, make sure there's no light underneath the straight edge. I can tell you, I have checked this table, and all of our tables are absolutely flat. The reason is, for these tables being flat, is this frame is going to mirror that table, and I want my screen to be absolutely flat. Okay, other tools that I need, you're going to need a piece of mesh. Mesh is, or should be, torn, that's not cut. If you cut, you'll fishtail through the mesh, and you will not have a rectangular piece like this. Once we tear it off the roll, we mark in the corner what the mesh count is. This happens to be 180, so I've written it on the corner. I'm going to need a set of alignment clips to put the mesh in the frame. We charge $8.60. You need a socket wrench. This is a little bit overkill on a socket wrench. The most important thing is the socket. That's a 5/8 socket. Most people own a 5/8 socket wrench. And you need an open-ended wrench, 1 1/4 inch. And if you don't have one of those, you can buy it at the hardware store. It's nice to have a set of needle nose pliers. This will help you a little bit. Okay, now we're going to insert the mesh and tension it. It's a simple 3-step process. The first step is to get the mesh in the frame. Always work with the square bar end right next to me. And there is a slot in each of these 4 sides. I want those slots facing straight up. And you know these rollers rotate, so I'm going to take my socket wrench and I'm going to tighten up the locking bolt on one side, one end, so the roller doesn't roll. So these 4 sides are now rigid.